This week on the Retirement Quick Tips podcast, I'm talking about navigating the storm, strategies for weathering a stock market downturn. Hopefully, by the time you listen to this podcast episode, the market will still be flying high at or near its all-time highs. That's where it's at right now as I record this episode. However, earlier this month, in the first week of August, we had some pretty sharp declines and it looked pretty scary there for a couple of days. And I was waiting with bated breath, waiting for the phone to ring and the panicked phone calls to start. But thankfully, they never came. I didn't have a single client panic or decide to sell. And I'm quite proud of my clients for that. But there are times when it is difficult to stay invested. Now, had that downturn lasted more than a few days, yeah, I would have started to get more phone calls. If it lasts a few weeks, a few months, it becomes harder and harder to stay invested. So that's what I want to talk about today, which is staying invested when your skin is crawling and you just can't take it anymore. I had this experience recently. So I was at a conference last week in Denver and I kept bumping into and ended up sitting at the same table with and having conversations with this very nice attorney from Missouri. His name was Dave. He's about 70 years old. And after, our fourth run-in, we were chatting and he gave me some advice, as many 70-year-old men are tempted to do for some reason. But he was telling me in the course of our conversation, he pointed out how I came across as a very compassionate and caring person. And that was very clear to him in our interactions, but also with other people as well. Over the years, I've had to train myself to be quiet and shut up and accept compliments, not dismiss them, not take the gift that someone is giving you and throwing that back in their face by denying it or downplaying it. I am actually, because of my sense of humor and how I think, I'm just tempted to turn them into some sort of self-deprecating joke. But I've had to discipline myself, and I'm getting better at it, to simply say thank you. And that's actually what I did in this case when Dave was showering me with genuine compliments. But on the inside, as I was saying thank you, my skin was absolutely crawling. I'm like, stop talking right now. I might need to walk away from this conversation if you're not talking, because I couldn't listen to this nonsense anymore. I just was like, oh, stop right now. And so why am I telling you this? Well, because that's exactly how we feel when the market takes a big dive. Your portfolio is down maybe 10, 20% or more, and it might last for a while. It might last for a few months. And we all go searching for an escape route. And the longer the downturn lasts, the more your skin crawls, the more uncomfortable you feel, the more tempted you might be to walk away, abandon your long-term strategy just to make that feeling stop, because it feels terrible. So today I want to talk about a couple of good strategies. They're simple strategies, and they're simple, which is good because they work and they're not hard to do. But they're strategies to implement and to remember and call to mind when your skin is crawling and when you just want it to stop. Now, the first one, it sounds overly simple, but it actually works quite well. And that is simply to look less often at your investments. So we are all wired to react to losses differently, and it actually helps keep us alive. And in behavioral finance, this is called loss aversion. So our brains, we feel the pain of loss more acutely, stronger. The pain of loss is worse than the pleasure we get when something good happens. It's like a 2-to-1 ratio. So if you lose $100, that feels twice as bad as gaining $100. And the solution here, though, is simple, which is to just stop looking altogether. Or if you can't do that, you just want to look less often. So if you check your portfolio daily or weekly and we're in the midst of a downturn, which, as I've talked about this week, it's not happening right now, at least as I record this, but it happened earlier this month, and a recession is inevitable. So, this is going to happen. So you want to move to checking it more often, maybe only monthly or quarterly. And because when you look less often, you're much more likely to see a gain from the last time that you looked. And so you're going to feel better. You're going to be less likely to get caught up in the emotional roller coaster of seeing these frequent drops, frequent losses, because you look all the time. Now, what's interesting is that I have access. I have easy access, a couple clicks of a button. I can see what my portfolio value is, my personal investments. I can see what the gain or loss is over any time period that I want to look. And also, if I look at the client portfolios, I see this every day. I see millions of dollars a day in growth or decline, depending on what happened in the markets the day before. So I experience this amplified on a much larger scale. I mean, you want to talk about the types of losses that I was seeing after August 5th when the Dow was down 1,000 points. Like, it's not pretty. But what's interesting is that when I'm looking at my own portfolio, I don't check it that often. Even though I have easy access, I might only look once a month. Sometimes I might go a few months without even looking and seeing what my balance is. And with my 401k, because it's a separate login and I have to go somewhere else, it's not as easy or accessible, I check that even less often. Maybe only a handful of times a year. At one point, I couldn't figure out my login. And then I was like, I don't want to deal with it right now. And so I was locked out for a while even. And it took me maybe like 6 to 12 months to fix that. So what's my point? Look less often and you'll be less likely to panic sell or get upset and make rash decisions that are going to hurt you in the long run when you look less often versus more often. Okay, the second strategy is one that I've used with clients over the years. I wish I could tell you how I learned this from somebody or I just stumbled upon it on my own. I don't actually remember, but it works exceptionally well for staying invested during a downturn. And that is call me in a week. So I have clients who will call and they'll varying degrees of panic or being upset. And they'll say, I want to sell. I want to sell this account or all of this fund or my entire portfolio, just get me out. And I tell them that if they want us to continue working together, because I'm not going to let them do this. If they want to do it, they can, but I cannot be their advisor anymore if they're going to be panicked in this way. But I do tell them if they call me in a week and you still want to sell as badly as you want to sell today, I'll do what you're wanting to do. And we can still work together. I just am trying to do what I can to save them from themselves. And you know what? It works exceptionally well. I think I've never had a client who followed through with their panic selling. Now, I have had a few clients who have called me back a week later. I think that happened maybe once during COVID and then a handful of times going back, to the financial crisis and things like that. But most of the time, people, they sleep on it, not just a day, but they sleep on it for like a week. And then they realize that the world is not coming to an end. They kind of screw their head back on straight and they realize that the most important thing to do is to keep the long-term view in mind. So call me in a week. Now, if you're a DIY investor, this works too. Set a calendar reminder. Don't do anything for a week. If you're panicked and you're determined to sell, mark it on your calendar. Don't do anything for a week. If the desire to sell or that feeling of panic has subsided, at least partially, let that be a sign to you that it is not the time to abandon a long-term investment strategy. Now, I will say there are exceptions to some of this. Like you might have certain investments that are circling the drain and you do need to get out of those. But I'm going on the assumption here that how you're invested, because my clients are invested this way, you're in quality things, quality investments that are not going on their path to bankruptcy. Okay, so if that's not the case, then you would handle this a bit differently. Preferably dealing with those risky assets before any sort of panic selling situation presents itself. All right, that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Ashley Michike, and this is the Retirement Quick Tips Podcast.